We're going to move along right now to our next panel. It's called Sizing Up Your Audience. Now, of course, everyone can agree that reliable, verifiable, third-party audience measurement is going to be fundamental to an ad-supported industry, and there are several approaches depending upon the technology, methodology. Should there be uniformity in how we measure our audience? Which method is going to be best for ad buyers? Which is going to maximize revenue? The experts on our next panel, Sizing Up Your Audience, will tackle those issues for you. So, Dave Ron and John Bradley together founded Boulder, Colorado-based Custom Channels in 1999. Today, Custom Channels programs and streams private label online and in-store radio channels for music-conscious brands like Chipotle, or Chipotle Mexican Grill, Whole Foods Market, Life is Good Apparel, the Bonnaroo Music Festival, and many others. So please welcome Custom Channels co-founder and president of Adult Rock Radio Consultancy, SBR Creative Media, Dave Ron.
Hi everyone, that was a mouthful, thanks. I want to quickly get our panel up here because I have one of them sitting in the next panel speaker area, but we'll get the rest of you up and we'll make a quick introduction. Paul, Rob, you're out there somewhere? Very good. And Philip, come on up. I'll make a quick introduction, and I'm going to let them do a quick bio. While they're getting settled in, just a quick reminder to our panelists, if you, do we have 3 microphones or are there just 2? Are we sharing one down at the end? Oh, there's 3. Okay. Work the mic. Love the mic. All right. As Paul mentioned, I'm Dave Ron with Custom Channels, and for those of you who know me, I've actually been a lifelong broadcaster that became a webcaster and transitioned into digital, more or less to the extent that a lot of people in this room have had to over the years. You know, our roots are in broadcasting. If you're like me, we lived and died by the Arbitron ratings, by how our audience was measured and how well our programming translated into numbers. But the cool thing about the Arbitron numbers over all the years, for all their faults, and we could go into that, you know, with the terrestrial ratings, that's not what we're here about. But one good thing about it is they were pretty much universally accepted by both advertisers, media buyers, agencies, and radio stations. It really created a very fluid open market for the buying and selling of radio inventory for terrestrial radio streams. In the last few years, of course, that's gotten a lot more complex. First came streaming, you know, a few years ago, 10 years ago, really coming onto the scene where we've got new metrics, new numbers, new data coming in that we've got to process, and then PPM comes about with Arbitron and starts to overload us with even more data. This panel is going to help us get all of that information and data sorted out a little bit and figure out how we're going to use it to, as many people are fond of saying, monetizing their streams. So we have a distinguished panel up here. We're handling both the digital side, a little bit on the terrestrial side, at least the crossover with Arbitron, and the qualitative side with Media Audit. So I'd like everybody to do a quick introduction of you and your company, and if you could just spend a minute or so just telling us what your company offers in terms of audience measurement in the digital realm. And then we're going to circle back on some of those things. We'll go into them a little bit more depth, but if we could kind of just go down and do the quick introduction, I'll start with Philip.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Philip Beswick, and I'm with the Media Audit. We are a multimedia survey company doing traditional media, radio, television, newspaper, other print. But in addition to that, about 12, 14 years ago, we got into surveying the internet. And so we focus on that in terms of media websites to bring greater value to traditional media so they can tie in what they're doing with their traditional media and add in what they're doing with their websites. So we focus on the qualitative, as Dave mentioned. We talk about demographics of people, we talk about the lifestyles, the product purchases, and also planned purchases of products. So as you go out and sell your radio stations in the marketplace, you can tie all of those same things into what the delivery is from your websites.
Very good. Thank you, Rob.
Hi, I'm Rob Favre. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer and General Manager of Triton Digital Analytics and Measurement. And most of you are probably familiar with the former Andomedia Top 20 ranker, now the Triton Digital Top 20 ranker that's published every month. What we do is we measure streaming audio. In fact, we're the only MRC accredited audio streaming measurement service. So what that means is that we've gone through the process of having our metrics identified and quantified with the Media Ratings Council. What we do is we take those measurements and we convert that, transform it into meaningful metrics, average active sessions, session starts, active sessions, that type of thing, and use that and provide that to our customers, our broadcasters, for them to be able to set prices, determine audience, and move forward with that.
Paul Krasinski, Senior Vice President of Digital Media and Analytics. I think all of you are aware of the Arbitron service on the over-the-air. Really, our goal was to leverage our research capabilities, our brand equity, and some of the track record that we have as far as developing new products. Certainly, I know the space really, really well. I've spent a number of years in the space. And really, our mission was to combine really the over-the-air with the streaming. So leveraging our portable people meter technology in that survey, combined with server-side, real-time, census-based data, really to give a feel for how do we measure an aggregate consumption of audio across various digital and over-the-air channels. So regardless of platform, channel, or device, we think it's important to really be able to measure for our broadcasters and the agencies those audiences that will reflect really a holistic number of audio consumption across. So that's really our mission and credo at this point.
All right, very good. So we're covering a wide spectrum here, but everyone up here focused on digital assets, qualitative, as you said, and quantitative, and everybody's got a little different approach as to how they go about it. You were mentioning, Paul, that you do a combination of traditional ratings method like PPM and server-side analytics. So tell us a little bit about that. How does that work at Arbitron?
Yeah, sure. So we leverage the PPM technology for the over-the-air. I think the depth of knowledge and data that we garner from that PPM certainly is the currency in the space today. And what we're trying to do is leverage really a streaming server-side methodology, which is coming from those log files, and combining those two methodologies, both with the benefits of both, but also the granularity of the PPM, which gives us a really strong view as to who is the listener, where are they listening, what is the income levels, and we're able to really give a unique perspective across various devices. So for example, as we heard in the previous panel, mobile listening is coming up. Internet-connected devices are important. It's going to be incumbent on a leader in the space really to move forward and be able to track that listener regardless of how they're deciding to engage the content. And I think that's important. Really, the consumer is going to decide, and we really have to be able to follow that consumer and present that data clearly and accurately to the agencies and advertisers so they can make the buys and ultimately buy the inventory here for all the broadcasters.
So Arbitron traditionally has gone in and created a panel of some sort in the marketplace. For now, it's with PPM in many cases. It used to be with diaries and still is in many markets where they knew exactly what households they were. So you knew some qualitative information, where they lived and their income levels and a bunch of things, which is your company's expertise as well, Philip, with Media Audit. Tell us a little bit about how you gather data from a qualitative standpoint for the services that you offer.
We survey using the telephone. We do about a 30 to 35-minute telephone interview of over 100,000 respondents here in America. We place about 1 million calls to get to that. They're all adults 18 plus, and we go through and ask them specifically in radio what radio stations they've listened to over the past 7 days, what radio station they listen to most often. That delivers to us the core. And then when we move over onto the web, we ask what they've listened to over the past 30 days and the past 7 days. So that gives us our core there.
So, and then are you asking them about specific sites that they visit or media that they consume online? Is it all a recall kind of survey such as that I remember, well, I shop at Amazon and I use iTunes and I do this? I mean, are those the kinds of questions you might ask in Media Audit?
Yes and no. All right, here's the yes. What we do ask people is how much time do you spend with the media? So we go through radio, find out how much time they spend listening to the radio. We'll go through the web, find out how much time they're spending on the web. The same thing with newspaper and other print publications and television. So then what that gives us is that you can go into the marketplace and say to people, in Chicago as an example, people spend about 25 to 27% of their media day listening to the radio. They spend about 27 to 30% of their time going online. Half of it happens to be with the doing email. Half of it goes into spending just surfing on the web. So in that situation, an advertiser can go in and say, all right, fine, this is where things are developing. So that's where are people spending their time. As far as where they go, we ask, since we're focused on media, what do you do with media websites? So do you listen to or do you go to WGN.com? Do you go to WLS.com?
Mm-hmm.
If we were just to leave it open-ended, people would stop and they would think, and it would take them a long time. So since we're focused on media, we ask specifically about media websites.
Okay, very good. Now, Rob, your company, correct me if I'm wrong, really takes kind of a different approach. Yours is almost all just measurement side right off the server. Is that right? You're not doing any telephone surveys or that kind of thing?
Correct. It's a census-based measurement. And, as a little explanation for that, I don't necessarily believe that we need one universal measurement for all audio consumption. And quite frankly, I'm a little confused about how you do it.
So are we. That's what we were hoping we'd answer on this panel.
What it really comes down to is if Paul here is a diary taker for Arbitron, he doesn't represent Paul. He represents some 3/4 of this room. It's a survey and panel.
536 people.
536 people. Maybe they're all 6'7" or 9 or something along those lines. But what Paul's doing when he's doing a diary side is he's representing a group of people. Well, how do you know that group of people aren't also consuming the media via a device that's instrumented so that we can collect it? And in that case, you're double counting. How do you eliminate that type of thing?
Well, is Arbitron kind of, and I'll have to address this to Paul, really. I mean, are you trying to compensate for both of those by saying, well, we're going to look at the sample survey and direct server logs? Is that what you guys are focused on, what Arbitron's focused on?
Clearly, we have two methodologies that we're bringing together. Obviously, we're leveraging the PPM and the depth of knowledge there. So whether it's the PPM meter, and then we're also leveraging the server log file data for those people who are really engaging the digital outlets, so devices, online, in the office. So then from that perspective, we're bringing those two together. Really, I think what we've found is that there is a need for really a look at just a comprehensive audio number, right? I think as far as bifurcating, digital and over-the-air radio, I think certainly there's a benefit to combining those two from a perspective of just looking at total audience, right? Radio has, not really had and gotten the credit for all the listening that's happening on all these other devices.
I hear a lot of frustrations from clients of mine who stream, and they go, boy, if we could just add that, 0.2 of a point to our PPM numbers or our diary numbers, whatever we're getting in Arbitron, we'd be happy with that. We don't need this splitting it out because the 0.2% is too small to sell on its own, but boy, it could move us up from 6th to 4th in Arbitron if we were able to do that. And the reason, a lot of the basic thinking among broadcasters is, well, we can't really do that because we don't do an exact simulcast of our stream, of our over-the-air broadcast on the stream because of after rules, and we've got to cover spots and that kind of thing. So they're not, they are doing ad insertion, which Rob, your company provides as well. So you have a vested interest in encouraging that piece of the business, I'm sure. But would we be better off if we just could run the over-the-air streams straight, with advertising at all, and just call it one big aggregate number and say that's what WLS gets as far as audience?
Dave, is it more of a consumption model? I mean, everybody here goes to the grocery, right? When I go to the grocery, if I buy a bag of ice, I'm buying a 5-pound bag of ice. If I'm buying a jug of water, I'm buying a gallon of water. Same product, I'm just consuming them differently, right? And everybody here is adjusted to the idea that one is measured in pounds, the other one is measured in gallons. I don't know that a single universal measurement gets us there. Now, I do agree that being able to view the measurements in one place is a benefit.
May I weigh in on this?
You sure can.
Advertisers, who we ultimately all respond to, and we're all consumers, they're interested in how do I reach that individual? what are the touch points for that individual? And they've always used these things called reach and frequency. Okay, how many people am I going to reach? How often am I going to reach them? And they got formulae that come along and say, you know, minimum of 3 times for this or 2 times for that. And that's where we're all going, is to focus on how can we monetize what we've got. And thus, we've got to be focused on how do these things overlap with each other. It's fine to have frozen ice and melted ice, but ultimately somebody needs to use them for the end point, and that is to figure out where they're going to invest their hard dollar today.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I think that what's important, certainly from the agencies that we've spoken to, and we've spoken to a lot of agencies, is currently radio is difficult to buy, right? There is a fragmented view of, if I'm trying to buy audio over the air, I have to go here. If I'm going and buying digital, I can buy it from a number of different sources. I think what they've been asking for is, how do we make it easy, right? So ultimately, to Philip's point, I think it's how do we leverage that additional reach that we're getting from all of these different platforms, right? The hardest thing for stations today is saying, okay, how large is my brand? And I can measure it separately, but when they go into an agency and they actually have to sell to an advertiser a seamless user experience, the agency really wants to know at a planning level, again, at the buying level it could be different, at the planning level, how large is the reach, where can I get this reach, and how do I talk to or strike up a conversation with those consumers that I want to look at? So I think that's where, you know, from a need from a currency perspective, I think there's certainly a need. But for us, it's really about enabling our clients, who are the broadcasters and agencies, with the tools to make those decisions.
Yeah, I think one of my own personal feeling is that over the years, the last 10 years, one of the holdbacks to streaming really taking off has been that sort of open marketplace of willing I don't even want to say that term, willing buyers and willing sellers, because that's all brings up a whole other can of worms. But it's that, you know, it is that marketplace where people understand what the metrics are. You can go in and you've got, as you said, a formula for, all right, you've got this many listeners and this kind of qualitative, I'm willing to put this kind of cost per point, you've got this kind of demand. And it seems like, I mean, if I'm a sales manager at a radio station now in charge of digital, I'm also having to wear that hat, I'm completely overwhelmed. And I don't know what the first piece of information is I've got to look for. Can the panel help distill that down a little bit? I mean, is there one tip we can give people in this room to walk away from saying, you know what, here's the metric you really ought to be looking at and what you ought to be focused on when you're planning your digital initiatives?
The best salespeople are the best storytellers. The more you know about your medium, all right, your website, and the more you can convey a convincing story beyond just the numbers, you're all set. One of the things that I know is that Burrell comes out and says that newspapers have about 10.5% of all the ad spend that goes into the web. Radio has about 1%. Radio has a tremendous future in terms of being able to grow it, because if you take a look at all the qualitative attributes of radio websites, 2/3 of radio websites are sitting between 25 and 54. 25 to 34, people are getting married, they're buying their first home. 35 to 44, they're having kids. 45 to 54, they're moving into a bigger home. Those are the super consumer groups, and radio websites deliver those in spades far better than you're going to get out of a newspaper website or a television website, and they got money.
So is the model really not all that different? We still have metrics that whether we're getting them from Arbitron or we're getting them from Triton or both, and then we have qualitative that we would overlay. I mean, I spent 10 years at KBCO in Denver, and that's one of the great qualitative sells of all time, you know, and that was what we would overlay and what would allow us to get the tremendous cost per point and conversion on our ratings, because we had such a good story to tell about not just how many people there were, but where they were. Rob, you want to speak to that?
Well, you know, actually, there's a theme running through here that everyone is touching on. The last two panels have touched on it, and it's the lack of education around the metrics that are out there right now. And it's on both sides of the fence, on the publisher side of the fence as well as the agency side of the fence. And I think it's incumbent upon us to initiate that education process.
Don't we have to understand it first?
Yeah.
You know, because on top of that, then, I know we have our own metrics. I can go to my own server and pull down numbers and see exactly what we've got, how many listeners there are. I may have my own qualitative if I'm asking questions about, who's in my database and that kind of thing. What do I need you guys for?
That's the same question everyone always asks, right? And you during the introduction, what you said is we all realize we need third-party verification of our data, because anyone, and it's a truism of the digital world. If you are streaming, if you are putting content out over the internet, you can measure it yourself. No one trusts that. They want an independent third party to verify.
Same server logs.
Yeah, and I would just say measurement's going to become more and more important. This is kind of the early innings here as far as whether it's server side or panel or a hybrid of both. I think in reality, what we're going to start to see is that agencies are becoming smarter, advertisers are becoming smarter, they're becoming more analytical, and they have less to spend and they need a higher ROI. So kind of inning one is, we've got to make it easy to buy. That's the first thing. So having on the publisher side the ability to look at metrics of consumption like an AQH, like a total listening hours, and on the digital side more like the impressions, I think at least we have a cornerstone that we can work with across the board. So whether that's AAS, whether that's session start, however we use the terminology, but then I think we start overlaying social data, right? So you have individuals volunteering information about their affinities, their behaviors, their likes, and that is all coming in as well. Those things are going to be layered on top of this foundation. I think you're right. If we don't get the foundation right, I think we become a medium that is seemingly difficult to buy, or I have to go to multiple places in order to get that done. And yet, I think there's a tremendous opportunity coming for the industry. If you look at kind of the reach numbers and you look at the engagement numbers of 2.5 to 3.5 hours are what users are spending online with a stream, I really don't think you can find another medium that is as engaging.
You're talking about the agencies, everybody wanting more granularity and accountability, and we have the ability now with all the research and tools and logs that we've got to get this down to very precise measurement tools. But that's a little bit of the elephant in the room too when you talk to a group of broadcasters, because we're not used to real precise measurements. We actually like what Philip said, being good storytellers about our product and having these, pardon me, the fuzzy math of Arbitron diaries to say what we've got out there. Are we opening up a Pandora's box or a can of worms? What other thing can I come up with that says, can we sell these numbers that we're, do we really want to be that accountable? Is that?
Well, do the agencies and the advertisers want you to be that accountable? You now have the ability. Streaming media is incredibly accountable. It's a census-based type of platform as it exists right now, and you have the ability to say, this person tuned into this particular station during this day part and consumed this media for this long. And you have that exact information. Now, if you play 4 ads during that period, you've got 4 impressions that were generated during that period. It's incredibly accountable. As an advertiser or an agency, why wouldn't you want that?
Well, I think the question really is also related to, I think we're further along in the identification, aggregation, and targeting game. I definitely do think we are, with the ability to do some of the server logs, look at IP-based measurement. However, if you look at really what's getting bought today, the ability to narrow down and say, I have 15 people that I now can buy at a $3,000 CPM, it really isn't attractive on either side, right? So for the publisher, they're saying, hey, it's too small, it's too focused. For the agency side, they say, yeah, that's great, kudos that you can do that. I don't think that it's not coming. It's definitely going to be the future. I think we're going to see those combinations, and we need to plan for that now. But if you look at the critical mass, still needs to ramp up in order for local broadcasters to really be able to say that targeting capability makes a lot of sense. I think there's no question the agencies are asking for it. Theoretically, it makes sense. But in reality, if you look at the insertion orders that are coming through from a lot of these groups, digital or traditional agencies, they're really still buying men 25-54 in this market who are, engaging this format.
And they want some tonnage, right? I mean, they're looking for some numbers.
Right. So
Which terrestrial radio delivers. Streaming, not so much. It's very granular. It's very, finely pointed. But, like you said, there's 15 of them on that.
Right, but there's no question that the mix of, over the air and digital is coming up much, much faster, right? I think that's where we all know consumption habits are moving, and yet I think they're complementary. And again, so to look at them as, hey, we're digital and this is over the air, I think we got to look at it as audio as a whole, because I think that's where ultimately we go from the $15 billion market in over the air and a $500 million market in streaming and say, hey, combined, both of those really increase with that extra 2 to 4% of audience.
Dave, I could weigh in on this and mention a couple of things, one of which was we focused heavily on terms of what's going on with ad agencies. They don't make up a huge part of what goes on in advertising. It's the local direct business that is really important to everybody in the room, and one can't lose focus of that. You talk about fuzzy numbers, and you can go and you can put your own counter on your server and see how many people come in. Then you can go and buy a software system out there, Hitbox or whatever. It'll give you a different number. I've never been able to figure out how electronic systems can end up measuring exactly the same person and end up with a different number. But now, you want to talk about fuzzy? Today, Nielsen measures television, Arbitron is radio, ABC is newspapers. People buy multiple media. It's a multimedia world. Nobody is going to sit around, aside from the electronic measurement systems today, and do what my company asks them to do. So I've just preached my death. But what's going to happen is they're going to mathematically fuse databases. So they're going to fuse Nielsen with Arbitron, with your data, with my data, and that's really going to be fuzzy. But it's the only way that we're going to be able to pull that information from the consumer.
They'll make up, the buyers will make up their own numbers based on all of the different...
No, I think they're...
I mean, not make them up,
talks
but...
about is going to look at it. But, no, we're into a movement of great complexity for simplicity purposes.
Yeah, and I think the cross-platform philosophy is really important. I think that there is going to be a number of merging campaigns where, again, I think whether it's your local advertiser or you're a national agency or brand, you're looking for how does that user engage the different medium, and it could be TV, it could be mobile, it could be radio, in different ways. So I do think that is going to happen. I think as we look at the Media Ratings Council, as you look at data fusion and data integration, there haven't yet been integration points that have been accredited, yet I think that's really where media is evolving to, where you are going to see these cross-platform and cross-channel opportunities come out, because in reality, that ability to measure that audience is where you'll find the results.
The thing is that newspapers taking out 10.5% of the dollars. If you've got a website and radio takes out 1%, how do you go out and position your website with regards to that newspaper? Generally speaking, websites will increase newspapers' website reach by about 30%. That's a powerful tool.
Very good. Any questions from the audience? We've had gone around the block on a few different topics regarding measurement. Anybody have an answer or confused?
I have a question for Paul. Have you seen any tandem evidence between streaming and people meter? I mean, we hear about radio stations that do really well in people meter, but they might not have a lot of streaming, or radio stations that do really well online. And people meter, what kind of connection, are you seeing any connection between online listening and people meter?
Yeah, I think currently we have, obviously in the PPM, we have minimum reporting standards that are showing some of the streaming activity. But in all candor, I think we're still pulling and synthesizing that data currently. I think you bring up a really good point, which is it's not that those are two isolated, mutually exclusive pieces that we're trying to pull together. I think once you pull them together, you have the opportunity to really look at that more granular information coming from the PPM and those people that are streaming to start to extrapolate. It's not perfect. It's not going to be overly precise, but I think you'll get a good picture of really what's going on. And I think that's where, again, leveraging the server side data and the PPM really makes a lot of sense, because I think then once we pull those together, you'll have inferences and more data that you can draw out, which generally speaking in the broadcast space has been difficult to garner registration information. People don't want cookies really going on. So there are other ways that we're going to have to get to this. And I don't think we feign to have all the answers. I think we're working really closely with our clients and agencies and advertisers to help us shape kind of that viewpoint. But I think it's still a work in process. So I'll get back to you, Michael, when I have the answer, or not.
I have a question over here.
Hi, I'm David Corty-Dutton from Sound Out Research. Just looking ahead in terms of the technologies you currently use, the diary, the server side, and the PPM, even looking at the advent of smartphones and the feedback loop that those give you, and Shazam technologies, et cetera, how far away do you think we are from integrating measurement into the mobile phone?
Well, measurement is already integrated into mobile phones. If you have Pandora on your phone right now, you're being measured. Same thing with Slacker. So if you're going to try out the new iHeartRadio app, you're going to be measured. So it's already there right now, and those metrics are being generated in real time. So
yeah, I think it's more using the consumer to actually feed back to the advertiser in terms of their overall media consumption 24/7.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, certainly, I think it's there today. I think we announced an acquisition of a company, Zocum, which is doing a lot of the tracking that you're highlighting currently. Also, if you look at the ability to download PPM software onto a smartphone device, those capabilities are there. It exists today, and they are accurate. So if you start to look at how PPM and server-side come together, you're actually getting that user-generated feedback directly from the user without necessarily having the sample size challenges that I think as mobile devices kind of continue to reach critical mass, I think that becomes a very interesting kind of mega panel issue.
The other thing is we're in the midst of an evolution right now, and we're still in our infancy. We're taking our first steps. So right now you have the ability via your mobile devices, your web, that type of thing, to collect registration information and to use it. So, the Slackers of the world, the Pandoras of the world, that type of thing, when you sign up for them, what they're doing is they're asking you for a year of birth, a zip code, and a gender. So you're actually providing that information to consume their service. So if you look at the evolution of targeting, how people are going to buy ads, whether it be the agencies or the advertisers, I think the first step is going to be geo-targeting, right? And that's where we're at right now. The next step will move on to demographics, where you're going to start looking at being able to say, I'm hitting a male 25 to 34 years old who lives combined with that geo-targeting in the Los Angeles area. So I think you're seeing that evolution happening right now. We don't have enough data to support the full model, but it's growing every day.
Yeah, and I think I agree there's an evolution and even a culture change that is happening, right? You're having new players enter the market, you have new ways of measuring, you have new partnerships that are coming up. I think it's the telltale sign of being flexible, right? So continuing with the pace while making advancements, and I think at times it is the pace that we need to continue to kind of drive at. And more importantly, as we look at our broadcast clients, they need to highlight not just the opportunity for over-the-air or streaming, but again, on that expansive brand opportunity, which I think is really important.
Great. Thanks. We have time for one more question over here.
Just a quick one about the fuzziness of the data. When Arbitron has the diary system, and when you pull the data from when Triton pulls the data from the server, how sure can you be if it's a normal computer at home and somebody's streaming, is it the teenager there or the adult there who's listening? How can you be sure?
On a server log?
Yeah, from the server log.
And you can't always be sure. That's part of the catch-22 right now. I mean, someone could actually start listening on their computer and go outside and play with the dog for an hour. while leaving the computer running. There's no way of doing that, of measuring that right now. What I will tell you is that it's highly unlikely, if you're using a service, any type of music service that requires you to register to consume that, that you're going to, I would go in as my son's ID. It just wouldn't happen. I would log in as myself. I've got my own custom playlist there. That's why I'm going to the service, to hear the music I want to hear, not, you know, the guy with the long hair looks like a mop. So, Justin Bieber.
You know, it's interesting though, as you know, the last panel was talking about all the different devices, mobile and otherwise, and I noticed there's a Logitech radio back there. You know, as those devices become just more common, where you've got an internet radio in your kitchen, and you come down in the morning and you turn it on, or somebody turns it on. We still need that qualitative and that sort of survey or some way of knowing, you know, who's, or the people meter, find out who is actually consuming that medium. It's interesting. Good question. Anything else? We wrapped up? Okay, great panel. Thank you very much. Hey, guys. They asked us to come out and do a photo.
He's always thinking. That's one of the great things about working with him. Hey, Dave, nice shot. Hey, thank you.
All right, get all my stuff out of here.
Got everything?
I need a dongle.
Okay, we're ready to move on. First of all, I'm John Guerin, COO of AccuRadio, and I'd like to remind you that at 2:50, the networking break is going to be sponsored by .fm. And then 3:20, immediately after the networking break, Triton Digital presents Digital Face-Off Panel, How Radio Can Become a Creative Showcase. One thing about Kurt, you know the information is fresh. Because he's always thinking. That's one of the great things about working with Kurt, is he's always thinking, and you